Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have an absolutely chilling collection of scary stories from the attic. So, get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I grew up in a huge Victorian house in Newton Upper Falls, Massachusetts, near the Charles River and Echo Bridge. The area around the bridge is a deep wooded gorge, and at night it gets incredibly quiet, except for the river and the echoes under the bridge. The house was built in the 1840s by the owner of one of the local mills, back when the area was a busy mill village. The house was enormous, 7+ bedrooms spread across 3 floors, plus a turret room in the attic. There were servant staircases hidden inside the walls, and little doors that led to strange passages between parts of the house. As a kid, it felt like the place had endless hidden spaces. The attic was one of the weirdest parts. The crumbling walls were covered in signatures and notes from the kids who had lived there over the years, names dating back all the way to the 1800s. Apparently, every generation of kids had gone up there and left messages. Behind the house, there was an old carriage house that still had the original horse stalls and an antique carriage from the 1800s. The basement was the part that always scared me the most, though. It had this huge, unfinished stone foundation and always felt cold and damp. Even during the day it felt unsettling down there, and I avoided it whenever I could. Most of the strange things I experienced actually happened on the 3rd floor though, where my bedroom and bathroom were, and I spent most of my time. I heard footsteps often growing up. I have 3 siblings and 2 dogs, so it was a busy house and there was usually a logical explanation, even if I looked around and couldn't see one right away. But one night in high school, I was home alone and started hearing footsteps coming from the 3rd floor. They were slow, uneven footsteps, like someone walking from room to room. The problem was, I was the only one home. I remember just standing there listening, waiting for one of the dogs to react, or for one of my siblings to come from around the corner. But the house was completely quiet except for those footsteps. Eventually I got so freaked out that I called the police because I thought someone had broken into the house, and they came, searched the entire house from top to bottom, even the basement. But they couldn't find anyone, and nothing was out of place. There's also another strange thing that used to happen on the 3rd floor. When I showered, I would hear what sounded like old music, like people singing on an old record, but it sounded warped, almost like a record stuck, repeating on a loop over and over. The weird part was I only ever heard it while the shower was running. The second I turned the water off, the music would stop. Another night in high school, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a woman sitting on the edge of my bed. She was just sitting there completely still. She blinked at me a few times, and a shiver ran down my spine. For a second I thought I must still be dreaming. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but she was gone. But I had a Tempur-Pedic mattress, and the spot where she had been sitting was still slowly rising back up, the way memory foam does after someone gets off the bed. And honestly, that is the part that seriously freaked me out. The next day my mom was cleaning out the rafters in the carriage house, and found a dusty portrait that had clearly been stored up there for a very long time. When she brought it inside and showed it to me, my stomach dropped. It was in fact the woman that I had seen sitting on the edge of my bed. The carriage house itself was already creepy enough. It still had the horse stalls with the horses' names on little plaques, an old carriage from the 1800s, and we even found bones in there before. The whole place smelled like old wood and dust, and the light was always dim even during the day. The building was built into a hill, so the back of the carriage house opened into what was basically a basement level underground. That lower level had these strange trap doors in the floor that led down into an even smaller basement space, along with some hidden passageways. The main door down there had been nailed shut, but the trapdoors could still be opened. Even during the day, it felt like the kind of place that you didn't want to spend too much time in. One night in high school, my best friend and I had been out drinking, and a couple of guys dropped us off near the carriage house. When we got out of the car, we both looked up at the same time. In the window of the carriage house, we saw what looked like a woman's face looking out at us. One hand was up against the glass next to her face. She wasn't moving, she was just staring out. My friend immediately started yelling because she thought it was her mum following us. Her mum was extremely strict, and honestly the kind of person who might actually do something like that. So she started shouting, "Mum, what's wrong with you? Why are you following me?" We ran over to the carriage house to confront her, but when we got there the face was gone, and nobody was inside. The only thing on the window was a single handprint in the dust, exactly where we had seen the hand. My friend even called her mum right there because she was so convinced it had been her. But yet, her mum had been home the whole time. To this day, I have no explanation for any of it. But growing up in that house, it really never felt like we were the only people there. And I still sometimes think about that portrait incident. I grew up in a home that was entirely full of spirits, but was ruled by something much darker. It would throw things, cause physical harm, slam doors, move objects, scratch walls, and punch holes in photos. It was a constant, ever-present part of my life as a kid. My friends experienced it, my sister, their friends and boyfriends, my parents, both of them, and especially me. I was the center of the activity for a long time, and this is why I was scared of the attic. In our home, my sister's bedroom had the hatch to the attic. It was literally just a ceiling tile you moved out of the way, but it opened into a dark, large, damp space barely suitable for walking. One Christmas season, my sister, mother, and I were pulling things out of the attic and shifting boxes down the large ladder that helped us get in and out. I, as a little girl, was not participating and simply watched, but I wanted to know what the attic looked like. I climbed up the ladder when no one was around and shifted my weight just enough to squeeze into the large opening. It was quite a large gap from the ladder to the attic, and I almost had to jump to reach the ledge. I shimmied my way up and looked around. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a high ceiling, lots of wood planks, fuzzy yellow insulation sticking up all around. I turned and got on my butt to slide back down, and quickly realized I was too short to reach the ladder. My legs just dangled, and I called for my mum to come get me down, but she didn't reply. Very suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Thick, wet, hot tension snaked through the room and filled up the air like carbon monoxide. I felt chills go down my back, and I was extremely uncomfortable. I looked to my left and saw it. A form, nothing concrete, just a blob of dark matter training its gaze on me. I screamed, knowing what it was. I screamed and screamed for my mum. The figure just moving ever closer as I wrestled to try and get out of the attic. It was almost on top of me when my mum finally pulled me down the ladder. I screamed at her that it almost got me, that the dark man was up there, and she told me everything was fine and calmed me down. This was recurring, the night terrors, the constant presence, and the continuing feeling of unease. It was a fight void of any reason because we were challenging something that was not human. My mother and I moved in with my grandmother to her horse ranch when I was 9. To this day, she still claims one of the worst things she ever did was give me the upstairs left room. To this day, she still claims one of the worst decisions she ever made was giving me the bedroom she did. There was a walk-in attic attached to the left bedroom, and something about the room and the attic gave my mother a bad feeling. Mostly things were normal in the beginning, but at night, really quietly, I could hear what I thought sounded a lot like a baby. It sounded so far away, it could have been from outside. In the morning I asked my grandmother about it, and she said someone must have had goats near enough to hear. I shrugged it off. Some months later, I'd come home and my radio would be changed to a completely different station when I left. I asked everyone if they'd been into my room, and they all said no. Then at night, my lamp would turn on and be on when I woke up without any memory of me turning it on. I started to get really afraid of the attic, so my grandfather agreed to install a lock on the attic door in my bedroom, because it had begun to open at random intervals when no one was in my room. One morning, my grandmother was staring out at the pastures through the kitchen window when she told me to come and look. My grandfather was walking across the field with a bucket of water and talking to himself. When he came inside, my grandmother asked what he was doing, and he said he was talking to Mr. Lester very matter-of-factly. Then he realized what he said and laughed, and said he swore there was a man walking with him, even though he knew it was crazy. The mares that were in heat would all be turned out in the same pasture and gather under the only tree there. After a year or so, they'd kick up enough dirt to reveal headstones poking out. We discovered someone had bush-hogged over the whole thing and sold it. It had been an entire family plot, with 2 deaths at childbirth. The old barn across the street, which was a stone's throw away, had also been the site of a suicide by hanging only 60 years before. On my bus, I was always the first to be picked up and the last to be dropped off. But one morning a kid was on the bus when I got on. Because the bus had to take a different route, he told me to sit by him and rushed into telling me that his family used to live there. We talked about it for a minute and then he paused and asked, "Which room do you have?" I told him which one, and then he looked down and back up at me and asked, "Does anything happen in that room at all?" My hair still stands on end to this day whenever I recall that experience. I later moved away, and thankfully haven't experienced anything like that since. I used to work at a funeral home in my early 20s. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and for the most part the job was routine. But the part that wasn't routine was the attic. The building was an old Victorian house converted into a funeral home. The embalming room and chapel were on the first floor, and the offices on the second. The attic was where we stored urns, old records, and boxes of forgotten keepsakes from decades ago. The funeral director half joked on my first day, "Only go up there if you have to." I thought he was being funny, but that's when I noticed the look in his eyes. The first time I went up, I was struck by the smell of dust and varnish, and a strange metallic tinge I could never place. Shelves lined the walls with urns, some modern, some antique, along with cardboard boxes full of photos, obituary records, and even a few personal effects families had never reclaimed. The first strange thing that happened were the footsteps. I was pulling down a box of urn catalogues when I heard someone behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. The second incident was harder to brush off. I was reorganizing some of the older urns when I heard a woman humming. It was faint, almost like a lullaby, and it followed me as I moved through the rows. I checked for vents or an open window, but couldn't see anything. The humming stopped the moment I froze, and started again when I moved. I left the box half finished, and went downstairs heart racing. The third time I had to go up late at night, A family had requested some display items for a service the next morning. As soon as I opened the attic door, a rush of cold air swept past me, though the whole building was sealed tight. I forced myself up the stairs. That's when I noticed one of the urns had been moved. It was sitting in the middle of the walkway, though I had just been up there the day before, and it had been neatly shelved. I grabbed what I needed and turned to leave, but as I passed the urn in the walkway, I heard a whisper directly behind my ear. "Stay." That was it for me. After that night, I refused to go up there alone. The director didn't argue. He just nodded, like he understood perfectly well the reasoning behind my decision. To this day, I think about the attic. I've been around death, bodies, and grieving families, and honestly, none of it unsettled me as much as the attic. I grew up in a house in the middle of nowhere that was built in the late 1800s. I'm pretty sure it used to be a dairy farm at one point, but that is besides the point. The point is, I've had a lot of weird experiences I can't explain in that house, and I thought I would share some of the crazier ones here. So for starters, if you count the basement and attic as floors, the house has 4. Basement, main floor, upper floor, and the attic. My very first encounter with the paranormal happened when I was 16. I remember my parents were out of the house. My 2 brothers were downstairs and I was in the office upstairs. I had to go downstairs myself to get something, and I had to walk past my parents' bedroom, which is at the top of the landing. Their door was closed, and as soon as I stepped down onto the first step, I heard a panicked female voice whisper, "Help me," from my parents' room. Naturally, I stepped back up and burst into the room thinking it was one of my brothers playing a prank on me, but no one was there. I've also had 3 different people tell me they've seen a similar ghost at different points in the house. These 3 people told me independently of one another, and there was no way they all got together and collaborated on the same story beforehand, which makes it even creepier. The first person, a friend named Kyle, said that on more than one occasion, he had seen the ghost of a woman wandering around the house and even outside. He said she had shoulder-length brown hair, either kind of wavy or straight, and she was white, wearing what appeared to be a purple dress, similar to the one Nicole Kidman wore on the movie The Others. My ex-sister-in-law, Hannah, said she saw the exact same woman a few times too, most notably in the attic, and she gave the exact same description: hair, dress, purple, and the fact that the ghost seemed to be really sweet. Then comes Savannah. She and I are hanging out with her niece, Lacey, when I realize it's getting late and I have to take them home. Savannah goes inside first, steps into the enclosed porch, and freezes before she opens the door that leads to the dining room. I ask her what's going on, and she turns to me with fear in her eyes and whispers, "Bobby, I saw her." I ask her what she's talking about, and she tells me she saw the exact same woman that both Kyle and Hannah told me about. Instead of looking sweet or human though, the version Savannah described looked angry enough to kill. She said the skin on half the woman's face was missing, and there was only a skull. She said the ghost was making her way across the dining room to the basement. I thought she was making stuff up, and stepped inside only to see the basement doorknob jingle by itself, like someone was trying to open it. Needless to say, I sprinted to get my keys, drove Savannah and Lacey home, and did not sleep at all that night. I also happened to catch a picture of a ghostly face. My parents' bedroom have double doors that have individual glass panes in them, and one night I was taking a picture with the flash on around the main floor of the house. In the picture I took of the doors, I saw what looked like a woman's face in one of the panes. There wasn't a lot of detail, but her facial expression looked like she was either moaning or in pain. I showed my skeptical parents the next day, and the first thing my mum said was, "Well, we're selling the house and moving." I've always enjoyed reading other people's stories. Though I'm mostly skeptical, I never thought I'd be sharing my own. Over the course of about 4 months, I've heard something on my roof maybe once a week. I stay up late, and I'll hear something like a whack land on my roof, then slowly walk around. It's a metal roof, so hitting makes a noticeable sound, and I can hear little taps and scratches like claws and talons, though it's too slow to make out if it's either biped or quadruped. Each time I was like, okay, it's an owl or a flying squirrel. One time I decided I was going to go out with a flashlight to see what kind of animal it was. When I got to the door, I got scared. I got the feeling that maybe I didn't want to see what it was. One time, it got close to my window, and I freaked out and shut off all the lights. Then I heard it right after it snowed. I was listening to it walk around and was like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to go there and see exactly what footprints this thing is leaving, and I'll know what animal it is. But when I go to check, the snow was immaculate and completely undisturbed. The thing is, I know I heard something walking around the metal right above me. The only other explanation is something like tapping and scratching from the inside of the roof from the attic. Sharing this makes it feel even creepier. This experience happened to me over 10 years ago, starting at 8. I played with a Ouija board for the first time. It just started with footsteps on the ceiling above my room. Above my room is the attic. I originally took it as perhaps the house settling. It kept like that for a while, just minor footsteps and knocking, and things being moved slightly above my head. After I turned 13, though, it got worse. I had my first boyfriend over, and 3 days later I saw it. I went down to the basement to do laundry and saw this thick fog move across the basement walls and stop in the back room next to the crawl space. It was hunched over, a black blob with eyes. I stared at it, then ran up the stairs and screamed. It chased me, it grabbed my ankle at the top step, and I fell face first onto the floor, and I refused to go down there for 2 weeks. I was sobbing, scared, and shaking. It would open my closet door when I was asleep. It then later on showed itself as this 7-foot-tall shadow. I would make out the nose, mouth, jawline, shoulder-length hair, and the outline of a cowboy-style hat. It has yelled my name in my ear, and I remembered it had an accent. After I had turned 16, it got closer. It would sit next to me, lay in my bed, and I could feel it around me. I was honestly so terrified. Lately, I think he's trying to come back. I thought I saw him again for the first time in 2 weeks. I'm genuinely terrified of him. I don't know what he is, he never harmed me. He just got so angry if I had any male connections. He watched me, showed himself to me. What could this be? I surely can't be imagining it. I know I'm not making it up. I'd like some advice. Any. I feel the urge to talk to him lately, like perhaps he's reaching out. But what do you recommend? I just started renting this house, and when I first looked at the property, I didn't feel anything negative or bad except for the attic. It's an old house built in 1941, and by the looks of it, it only had one owner. I had to do a couple of demo jobs to get the house into a livable state for me and my 2 babies. Yesterday, I took my friend to the attic space, which was now converted into 2 bedrooms, and my son's room is to the right of my living space. My friend who was with me felt very uncomfortable and a very heavy presence right when we stepped in. We were smoking a joint and having a conversation about what I wanted to do in this room. I had opened one of the windows because there were no screens, and I leaned out and kept talking. But when I went to turn to say something to my friend, I felt a very evil presence that did not feel human. Normally when I have ghost experiences, my hair stands up on end, but this inflicted upon me a terror that reached me to my core. It was different, deeper, and made my whole body freeze. I heard what sounded like someone crawling towards me, close and deliberate. And then outside I heard wind chimes as this was going on. The chimes were ringing, yet there was no wind. It was just that eerie, unnatural sound adding to the whole feel. I'm planning on doing a thorough cleansing of this space before moving in, but it did not feel good. The energy was oppressive, like something was watching us. The attic also has a blocked-off room that almost looks like a disappointment room. There's an old headboard and just older-style furniture piled up inside, like someone tried to hide it away. The doorway is covered with boards, but you can still see the outline of the frame. It felt wrong, like it was meant to stay hidden. I don't know what's in there, but I'm not going to open it until I've cleansed the space, because everything about this house feels heavy, and I don't want any nasty surprises. I'm deaf and have hearing aids and cochlear implants. Due to years of speech classes, I can talk and use sign language. Anyway, when I was in 5th grade, me and my grandma moved to a complex house. We lived above while her boyfriend lived below. It was a cute, small apartment with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and had a window that overlooked the driveway. And there's a door in the kitchen that goes up to the attic. Just a few weeks after we moved in, my grandma had an old radio station on the table in the kitchen, and it doesn't quite work, but she likes it, so she used it as decoration. One night, I was woken up by a very loud noise. I have a little bit of hearing in my left ear, so I could hear it but couldn't make out what it was. I saw my grandma rushing down the hallway, so I followed her into the kitchen. The radio's light was on, lit like a greenish light that sounded like static. She couldn't turn it off and signed to me to unplug it. I checked and it wasn't plugged in. It finally stopped a few minutes later. Around Thanksgiving, me and my grandma went up to the attic to get some Christmas stuff. The attic is very small and narrow. You can see outside through a little window, and I had an uneasy feeling and didn't want to stay up there because I felt like I would be grabbed. There was a door that was completely bolted on the other side of the room. A few days passed and my grandma was at work and wanted me to go up. I was nervous and afraid, but forced myself to go. I went upstairs to the attic and saw the door was no longer bolted. It was wide open. I had a feeling that someone was looking directly at me, and suddenly there was a loud thud behind the door. I just ran down the stairs and locked the door. It got worse for a week. I was waking up feeling like I was being held down. The footsteps in the hall got louder, and there was banging on the wall. I would joke with my grandma that the ghost knew I was deaf. Well, my bed was shaken for a few days, scaring me out of my slumber, and I was losing sleep. The final straw was when I was sleeping. I had a bookshelf with dolls on it just across the room. My bed was shaken, and I suddenly felt something falling on me. 3 of my glass dolls fell on my face. I definitely had bruises for days from that. My grandma once was woken up to the sound of her stepdad calling her by her nickname. Her stepdad died when I was turning 3 or 4, so this definitely shook her up, because she could even smell the old cologne that he would always use, along with the smell of coffee. It really freaked us out. For some background, I live in a rental built in the 1900s. It's a big old house with not a lot of background info I could find about it. I know it was vacant for years before we got into it, and had to be completely redone to make it livable. There are articles in the attic about deaths that happened in the 50s, but they didn't occur at the home. I'm told the giant, double-sized pocket door between the living room and dining room, and the door right next to it, leading from the living room to the foyer was because people used to have funerals in the home back in the day. Anyway, right off the bat, the creepy walk up the attic is my almost 2-year-old's room. We've lived here for 1 year. I was terrified of the attic for several months and refused to go up there because me, my friend who stayed with us most of the year, and my kids have all heard running sounds in the attic early morning and midday. And up until I moved, the changing table in front of the door of the attic opened multiple times on its own during the middle of the night, just like the door to the room itself. It sticks and isn't easy to open, so naturally we assumed it must be raccoons until we sent someone up there at the end of October. And get the news back, there were absolutely no signs of raccoons, little nests, no mums or babies or droppings. We have a camera in her room overlooking her crib. It's live and doesn't record. Every night since we've lived here, despite the fact that she sleeps through the night, between 12 and 3 a.m, she screams loudly. And in the 2 seconds it takes to open the camera app, she's out like a light and doesn't appear to have even moved. Could it be possible there's some kind of entity messing with her in the middle of the night? My son bought a house in November of 2023. When I first saw the listing online, it sent a shiver up my spine. I wanted nothing to do with the place, but he insisted we look at it anyway. It's an old house, supposedly built in the 1900s, but I can't find proof of that. I can't find much information on the house or who built it anywhere. I've googled the address and searched the newspaper archives, but only found a small amount of information. Right after he closed and got the keys to the place, we decided to get measurements and figure out what we needed to do to get ready to move in. That's when things started getting strange. Looking back, I don't know how we didn't notice some of it beforehand. There is a weird attic-type room upstairs. It's only 6.5 feet wide and 21 feet long, with no electric outlets, and it only has one overhead light. It has a weird little door that creeps me out. My son has screwed it shut now. The bottom of the door to the room has a doggy door cutout, and I was looking at it and noticed there were 3 different locks on the door. I asked my son what his thoughts were about it, and right then something grabbed my butt. I jumped and spun around to see who did it, but no one was there. My son looked at me like I was nuts. I stepped away and it happened again, and I yelled out loud for it not to touch me. We went downstairs to check the rest of the house and everything seemed okay, until we get to the small bedroom through the kitchen. It was again the door that caught my attention. The outside of the door had a busted padlock bracket, with a lock still attached. It had been pried off, but left hanging. Inside that bedroom, the door that opens to a bathroom also had a padlocked bracket and a hook latch, so basically if anyone was in that bedroom with both locks, they would have to have gone out the window if they wanted. Shortly after we moved in, I started seeing things. One night I was standing at the kitchen sink and saw a tall, thin, older man wearing a top hat, a light-coloured button-down shirt, and dark slacks walking slowly from the living room through the kitchen right behind me. But he didn't notice I was there. I tried to figure out who he was, but he seems to be from before the house was supposedly built. A few months later or so, I was in the kitchen late at night. I felt like someone was watching me from inside the little bedroom, and I turned to look and saw a young boy around 8 to 10 years old. He was very thin, with dark hair, and was hiding behind the door, peeking around watching me in the kitchen. A different ghost I saw was a young man in his early 20s, with a blonde, feathered mullet. He had blue jeans and a concert-type tee on. He spooked me. I screamed, and he disappeared. Every now and then in my bathroom, I run into a wall of very flowery perfume, so strong it takes my breath away. It usually happens around 2 a.m. and only in the master bathroom. I wasn't all that worried about anything until now, because something is bothering my 1-year-old granddaughter and I don't like it. She wakes up crying between 2:30 and 3 a.m. every morning, then keeps waking up about every half hour until around 6 a.m. Then it stops. Her mama was watching the baby monitor one night, which is when she saw a short, black, shadowy figure around her crib. A few moments later, she woke up crying and shaking, scared. We're expecting her little brother in a few months, so we really want to get to the bottom of whatever it is and get rid of it fast. I've tried smudging with sage, doing a salt perimeter, but nothing has helped. Does anyone have any advice on what we can do to make them leave? First of all, I'll give you a little backstory about my life. Growing up, my grandmother and I used to mess around with the paranormal, doing EVP sessions and things like that. But when I turned 13, we stopped. My grandma recently started doing it again, and since then, strange things have started happening to me. I work in a nursing home and have been there for almost a year. I never really experienced anything particularly paranormal there. I work nights, so there are the occasional creaks in the dark, but nothing major. But that changed one evening when I was emptying a cath bag, and the glass trinket in the room with the resident's roommate, who was at the hospital at the time, started making a clanking sound. I turned around just in time to see the trinket fly across the room at me. I calmly walked out, collected myself, then went back in and picked the object up and put it back where it belonged. 2 weeks passed, and nothing else happened. Then one night at around 1 a.m., I was sitting at the nurse's station when I heard what sounded like someone running down the hallway. I jumped up to look, but there was nothing there. I brushed it off as my mind playing tricks on me, since I had been dealing with some mild paranoia that night. About half an hour later, I had calmed down quite a bit, when the attic started creaking. It sounded like human footsteps coming from above me, and I ran to the other unit and asked if any of the maintenance men had come in and were up in the attic. They all laughed and said no. I told them I thought someone was up there. The unit nurse then told me that stuff had fallen out of the attic doors, and one of the items was one of those masks you wear when you're sick. I checked every attic door, and they were all closed with no ladders leading up to them. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, but to this day I believe someone, alive or dead, was up there. Then one night, I was home asleep, when I remember seeing shadow people moving quickly around my room. I don't know if I was awake or asleep, but it felt completely real. They were looking for something. I couldn't move, but I could watch them and think, what in the world is going on? Then I was suddenly in my grandma's old house, and these shadow people were ripping up the stairs looking for seeds. Then I was in an apartment complex stairwell, and this boy told me to give him my hand. I did, and he cut the top part of my finger, and inside me were 3 little white seeds, and he took one of them. At that point I woke up, and my finger hurt. I went back to sleep, saw the shadow people again, and one of them touched my back, and I woke up with my back cold. To my surprise, my shirt had been raised up in the back, and my back was exposed. Did what we did when I was younger make me automatically connect to what she does now? What does this all mean? Was it a bad dream? Or did I just experience something paranormal? My husband and I lived in Centerville, Georgia for a few years in a ranch-style house that was built in the 1960s. It had a small-sized crawl space with no insulation, dirt, spiderwebs, and all the usual things you'd expect. It also had a typical southern attic It was basically a small standing area of 2x4 rafters and insulation. The purpose was simply to store heat in the summer or to keep it out the house and in the winter keep it from leaving. There were some questionable things about this house, mostly ignorable quirks, like the bullet holes in the reinforced makeshift metal shield that covered the windows of the back door in the garage. Little things, features. My husband had made comments to me about waking up at night hearing strange, loud noises coming from the attic. He said it sounded like a very large wooden dresser being dragged across hardwood floor directly above the master bedroom that was loud and very obvious. He also said one of our dogs, a Catahoula hound dog, would always wake up, jump off the bed, and move to where the sound started. At that point, his hackles would raise, shoulders lower, and his gaze would focus on the sound. He would then slowly follow the sound, silently stalking as it made its way across the room. He would follow it directly across the bed, jumping up and walking across both my husband and me as he followed it silently. When the sound finally reached the bathroom door on the far side of the room, the dog would sit, stare up, and slowly lower his head as if he were watching something come down from the ceiling. He would then slowly turn his gaze to the left towards a window in the bathroom. At that point, his hackles would lower and he would gingerly return to bed. According to my husband, this happened regularly. My husband told me about this for 6 months, and for 6 months I thought he was just making things up to try and scare me. Turns out he wasn't. I woke up hearing this loud scraping noise from above our bed that sounded like a heavy wooden dresser being dragged across a hardwood floor. I reached to shake my husband and waking up, but he was already awake. He looked over and just said, "Watch the dog." So I did. And the old hound dog did exactly what my husband said before, hackles up, jumped off the bed, followed the sound, stopped at the door, watched, traced the noise, and relaxed and came back to bed. My husband just said, "I told you." My husband at first thought the noise was raccoons or such in the attic and tried to investigate it, looking for any means for something to get in, but he never found anything. The attic vents were all in good shape, and there weren't any holes or any way for anything to get inside. He also looked for slats or anything that could recreate the noise over the bedroom, but there was nothing, just spaced out 2x4 supports and insulation. He did all of this before he told me about the noise. I'm glad I got to hear it when I did, because of the frequency. And I'm not gonna lie, originally I looked at him like he was crazy. I think I must have been around 9 years old, and my sister 6. Our parents were downstairs watching TV, and they were heading up to get ready for bed. It was already dark outside, and most of the house was dim, with only the faint glow of the TV leaking up the stairwell. The only nearby light switch was at the top of the first flight. I was walking ahead of my sister, already stepping into the hallway on the first floor, and she was still a few steps behind me on the staircase. I reached towards the switch, and maybe 2 seconds before my hand touched it, we both saw something. And the instant I flicked the light on, it vanished. My sister said she saw it rush past her as she came up the stairs, brushing close to her. I saw it from the hallway, coming from my left and shooting straight up the staircase towards the second floor, towards the attic, which at the time was my bedroom. It moved impossibly fast, a blur that seemed to glide rather than run, and the moment the light came on, it simply vanished. We both screamed and bolted downstairs, talking over each other as we tried to explain to our parents. They brushed it off, suggesting it was probably our cat who was white, but she was very much downstairs with them the entire time, so it couldn't have been her. What we saw was low to the ground and white, maybe about the size of a basketball. It had a round shape because it moved so quickly, and it stretched into a more elongated blur. It didn't look solid, more like a puff of white smoke or mist, faintly glowing enough to be visible in the dark, but no limbs or face or anything resembling a person or animal. Just a small, bright, smoky mass, speeding up the stairs as if it had somewhere to be. And neither of us saw it again. My sister believed this happened around the time my grandfather passed away, but my memory isn't as clear on the timing. Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't the cat, and I wonder what everyone else thinks it might have been. Some backstory first. When I was in high school, the house we lived in generally had odd things happen in it. Our cat would freak out and stare at the cabinet my mum had porcelain dolls in. Only ever in this house, and not anywhere else we lived. The dolls' heads would frequently be facing different directions than they were placed in, most commonly towards mine and my brother's pictures in the dining room. The pull chain on the ceiling fan would click, things like that. My room in particular was right next to the attic stairs. They ascended over my closet. I would quite often hear what sounded like scratching behind the wall, where the stairwell was, and footsteps above my room in the attic. Easy. Small animals getting into the attic, right? We found a small child's bed hidden away in the corner of the attic, and when we asked the neighbors, we found out the old owners had a small child that sadly passed away. Well, one night when I was home alone, must be about 16 at the time, I heard what sounded like a closed door bouncing against the door frame. I went upstairs because the only possible closed door would be to the attic. Sure enough, it was bouncing back and forth against the frame, but that wasn't it. The door handle was jiggling and turning back and forth as the door bounced. I did the only logical thing at that point, shoved the ironing board against the door, sprinted down the stairs out the back door, and went to my neighbor's house until my mum got home. If I recall correctly, I believe the kid had leukemia or something, but I could be wrong as this was over 20 years ago now. And we were there for 5 years or so, but I've had experiences at other places as well, and my mum has too since she was a child. I have lived in a haunted house for 20 years, and have a lot of other experiences I wish to share. My grandma always said that ghost sensibility runs in our family. The first one I can tell you about is the one that I remember most vividly. I was around 16 years old, and I lived in a part of the house that wasn't sanctified by a priest. We had the house sanctified in 2007 because my mother was finding bloody scratches on her ankle in the morning, and we were hearing footsteps every night from the attic. The part of the house where I lived at that moment was a ruin back then. I was attending a very hard high school and needed to study late a lot. Well, this one night I was staying up late. I was feeling a bit weird, as if something was standing behind me. I turned around, staring into the darkness a few times, but of course nothing was there. Then before midnight, I felt this sudden feeling that something wanted me to go to bed immediately. I didn't. Less than an hour passed, and again I felt this pressing feeling that I needed to go to bed. Then I heard a great rumble from the bathroom. The doors were closed. I understood. My ghost really wanted me to go to bed. So I said aloud, all right, I'm going. I didn't go to the bathroom until the morning. In the morning I checked, and all of my soaps and shampoos were lying in my bathtub. There was no earthquake, and all of them were on the shelves with at least 7 inches of clearance before. I understood my ghost was looking out for me to get good rest. This past Memorial Day, my husband's siblings came to our home for the weekend. While we were having breakfast, I picked up my cat and brought him to the bar so they could meet him. I noticed how terrified they looked of him. My husband had to reassure them that my cat was safe. Moments passed, and everyone was talking at once about a cat from their childhood that was 200 years old. They said that when they were children they met a yellow cat. My husband said he never wanted to associate with it, pet it, or anything like that. There was a centuries-old home in the area where they lived that burnt down and got rebuilt. My sister-in-law said she explored the rebuilt home and went into the attic out of curiosity. It was there she found an old chest of photos and miscellaneous items, and there were photos of the same cat in there. They distinguished it by the same burnt tail and fur patterns. One day, they tragically witnessed the cat get run over by a vehicle. It was left as flat as a pancake, but suddenly it seemed to inflate back to its normal state and walked away unharmed. There are so many strange stories about this kitty. Is it really that old? I'm not really sure what's happening. This incident happened a few years ago. It was around 9 p.m, and my mum, my sister and I were getting ready for bed. It was the middle of summer, so the night was hot and heavy. My sister was sleeping in the living room because her room was simply too hot to sleep in, which was normal for us. We all said goodnight and headed off to bed. About 5 minutes later, my mum woke me up in a panic, with my sister clinging to her side. My mum told me to get my bat and search the house for any intruders, so I did. I checked everywhere I could think of and found nothing. After doing a very thorough search, I came back into the living room and asked what happened. Apparently my sister had heard a voice say in a very threatening way, "There is no escape." Keep in mind, my family are strong believers in the paranormal. We are also Wiccan, so we have protective barriers around the house. Because of that, there was supposedly no way an evil spirit could have gotten in. The next day we went out and bought sage and other herbs to cleanse the house, and since then we have never had another experience like that. To this day I'm still afraid of our house. The only spirit still left in there is an old man who lives in the attic. My only explanation is that some evil spirit somehow threw its voice through the barrier and into the living room. But even that does not explain why we've not had any other problems since then. If anyone has any ideas about what might have happened, I'm stumped. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope you have enjoyed tonight's collection of attic scary stories, and if of course you have, you can let me know down below. Your thoughts and comments really do go an awful long way. I would also like to thank my amazing members and patrons whose names you can see on screen now. And for anyone who would like some bonus free content, tomorrow on Patreon I am launching some alien stories. And for those of you who are paid patrons, there are some movie theatre stories over there as well. Thank you so much for everything, guys, and hopefully see you again soon. I will be back all the same here on Saturday for some jail and prison stories. Till next time, guys, good night.